And we are finally here talking about what it is we can do to overcome discomfort to finally succeed in our own personal lives. We all know the biggest thing that holds us back from seeing our success is usually ourselves. So, what is it that we can start to do to make sure that we don't have to worry about what's going on? We can not let our minds take over everything and just allow us to do the things that we want. We're going to be breaking this into two different aspects. We're going to talk about one, the mindset side of different things and why people hold themselves back. What are certain common reasons and certain fears that people have, and the other side is the actual practical tips about what is it we can start to do, because let's say you have that fears and you got to get stuff moving, you got to get stuff going. What is that we start to do? So we're going to be taking a look at both of those sides. That being said, if you are new, make sure to hit the subscribe and the follow button if you are on YouTube, and if you are following on the podcast, make sure to follow us over there. Alrighty, everybody, so jump straight into it. So when it comes to success, so many times people don't realize that the thing that holds them back the most is really themselves. And it's interesting because when in the coaching world, the more I speak to people, the more I realize they know exactly what it is they need to do in order to see success. They know exactly the plan. They know the next step. And what's interesting is that when I come to coaching, and a lot of times it happens like the first one or two calls, we're trying to figure out, okay, so this is our plan, this is our goal. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, so what do we need to do next? Like, well, I probably need to make that phone call. I probably need to go over to that person, like just ask them a question. Or I probably need to post something or send something out as an email. And coach is like, did they not know that beforehand? Like, why did somebody need to pay a coach hundreds or maybe thousands of dollars to find out what that they need to be doing? And the reason why is because we hold ourselves back, and we all do it. It's the reason why even coaches need coaches, because coaches, especially coaches, know that, like, if you have somebody who's going to be able to hold you accountable to do the things that you need to be done, then all of a sudden, like, you're going to start to see the success that you want to see. And it's so important that we have to recognize that we too need to know what it is that has to get done for us. And guess what? We usually know what's happening inside. We usually know internally what are the steps that we need to do in order to make sure that we can start to see that success. And so many times people don't realize it, but if we could start to work on that, just get clarity on that before you even start to take the action. Just say, okay, what is the next step? I know what the next step is. You could even journal. You don't need a coach necessarily, but you can journal about it. You can ask yourself coaching style questions. I'm actually going to be having a YouTube video, depending on you're watching this, come out on my top 12 most important coaching questions that I found extremely beneficial. And what we need to start to do is we need to start to try to figure out what are those things. What are those things that we know that if we do, we're going to be able to get onto the other side of success. And success can either mean actually achieving something, or it could just mean like getting rid of some type of anxiety. Maybe there's something that is just bothering you, a conversation that you need to have that you're not having. And the more you delay it, the harder it's going to be. And we really need to define success for ourselves. And I think once we have that ability, once we're able to say, hey, you know what is the X, Y, and Z thing that I can start to do to allow myself to start to get on the other side of the wall, then all of a sudden we're going to be able to get there. And we get so scared. And the more we delay it, the bigger this monster gets. And the bigger this monster gets, the scarier it's going to become. And guess what? Like, the monster's not going to go away, which is terrible. And trust me, my own personal life, there have been things, there are still certain things that I'm like scared to do. And I know that the more I delay, the worse it's going to get, which has its own anxiety that's going to bring. But we have to understand that, okay, so we have to just look to take that breath and look to take that action. And guess what? Everything's going to be okay. And I think if we could start to recognize that, then all of a sudden we have the ability to move forward. So what are the common mindsets that people go through? What are common things that others might be happening, others might be working through that really hold them back on the things that they want to be doing? So number one is the fear of failure. That's just like number one. Usually right there up front is usually fear of failure, because nobody wants to fail. Everybody wants to feel good. Everybody wants to win all the time. We realize is that it's very possible that we might not win, and that's scary. We realize that we might have a business idea and might reach out to somebody, and guess what? They might not like it. I remember there's this one time I had an idea and I went over to a guy who is a billionaire, like a known billionaire, and I asked him a question. I didn't even ask him directly. I asked him like backwards, and he was like, sorry, I don't know anything, or I don't know anybody. And I was like, oh, that really hurts. But I was so proud of myself that I asked. And the way I framed it was that I was working on just to ask. I wasn't even reframing. I was reframing what the win was. Instead of getting a yes, the reframe was to ask for a win. And the more, we'll get to this in a second, but the more you can work on that, then the better it is you can start to take that action. So understanding that we have this fear of failure that's going to be very possible. And it's probably because like we've seen failure in the past. Guess what? I think if we start to shift that, if we could start to look at it differently and reframe what fear of failure really is, then that's not really failing, it's just feedback. It's one of the most important lines that I love. It happened to me. I told the story a bunch of times where like I lost money on a real estate deal, and I came to one of my coaching sessions with my coach, and I asked, I was just very down because I lost a bunch of money, and he was like, "So, like, why are you so upset?" I'm like, "Oh, I just lost all this money and this and that." He's like, "So?" I'm like, "Should I repeat myself? Like, I lost a lot of money. Like, this is not cool." And he's like, "It's just feedback." I was like, "Whoa, can I take a step back? Can you repeat that, please?" And he's like, "It's just feedback." And I think if we could start to have that type of mindset of anything that happens, it's really just feedback for us. Whether it's something that we're nervous to do, whether it's some failure that happens in our lives, whether it's the way we react to something, what's the feedback that we can get? And are there certain times where I like certain areas of my life, I'll maybe get more emotional. And the question is like, why am I making so emotional? Why am I making such a big deal out of this? What's the feedback that I can get? And all of a sudden we could come at it at a different angle. It's not something that's holding us back. It's something that we can start to learn. It's like, here's like the instructions to your Lego set that you now need to start to build. And we're not going to give you the pieces also, so you got to find the pieces, right? But regardless, at least I have the instructions. This is like this great information that I can now have to look to become better. So the next time something similar happens, I'll be more prepared. I'll be able to take that action. So many times people don't realize that they have the ability, that the clues are right in front of their face. They're just not in tune to it. They're constantly beating themselves up because something's not working. And it's like, well, if you keep trying to take a square peg and put it in a round hole, like it's not going to work. Like you got to change something up. And what we have to recognize is that we have the ability to really switch that. And all we have to do is just be in tune to it. And if we start to be in tune to it, like anytime we feel like a little bit uncomfortable, instead of like just automatically reacting to it, say, hey, what's going on here? What's the feeling that I'm feeling? Why do I think I'm feeling like this? What's telling me? Sometimes it could just be our egos. We spoke about that a year or two ago. But what about our egos that are really holding us back from hurting ourselves? How is our ego the one who's really controlling us as opposed to us controlling ourselves? And what we have to realize is that we have to have more control over it. We can't allow ourselves to just fall to our natural way. And if we start to work on that, then it could be something that could be really lifted. Another thing is similar to fear of failure is fear of rejection. So let's say you have to go ask somebody something, or you have to, you're going on a date, or you have to ask your boss for a raise, or you just have to ask a coworker for help. And all of a sudden you ask them and they say no. Or even worse, you don't even ask them because you're scared they're going to say no. And it was interesting. I was recently listening to I saw one of these like clips by what's his name? The guy who started Apple. And he was talking about how he was saying how so many people just don't ask. So many people have so many ideas. So many people like want certain things, but they just don't ask them, because they don't ask, they never get. And the consequence is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's one of those things that I really do more. But like whenever like people like sometimes like randomly ask me to like post things for them. Not that I have any type of a following, but like I have more people maybe than they do. And they're like, oh, do you mind posting this on your status or sending you an email? And I'm like, sorry, I just have this rule that I don't post other people's stuff. And what's interesting is that I want to tell them like, but like keep asking people. Just because I said no, like it's my own silly rule, but like keep going, keep asking people. And I think that could be something that could be really beneficial to us, because so many times we get so scared to ask because we're scared we're going to get rejected. And if we could just say, hey, you know what? I have the ability to do X, Y, and Z. I can do X, Y, and Z. Then also, like, it's going to be really helpful for us to be able to move forward. So recognize that even if something happens and you get rejected, that rejection, first of all, it's just there to protect you, right? Nobody wants to get hurt. Our bodies, our minds, and our egos don't want us to get hurt. So therefore, it's just trying to protect us. So why do we want to get hurt? We just stay away from it. It's like our minds are telling us, like, oh, if you do that, like you're touching a flame, you're touching a fire. That's what our minds are telling us. And we have to realize, no, this is not a fire. This is like this is totally different. Like, this is cool. Yeah, and if we do get rejected, it might hurt. But guess what? But then at least we're a step closer. And once we do that, once we start to shift that, that could be something that could be really different. Other people have like a fear of success or imposter syndrome. They have like so many different reasons of why people don't feel like they can take the action. Like, who am I to do that? Or even if I do that, but then, if I do see that success, I was recently speaking to a woman about this. Like, even if I do see that success, what's going to happen is that it's only going to hurt me in a different area of my life. And what we have to realize and recognize is that we have to show up the way we have to show up. We have to take the action we could start to take. And so many times people just beat themselves up. They hold themselves back from doing so many things in their own personal lives just because their brains are the ones that are controlling their minds. Their mindset just holds them back. And it's not easy because we constantly train ourselves. I think every day we're training ourselves, either positively or negatively. And usually until you get into this stuff, like you're concentrating yourself negatively. You're constantly changing yourself in a downwards way. And so I say when people are so negative as they continuously get older, because they constantly have reaffirmed it. And what's crazy about it is the more negative you are, the more you see the support for the negativity. And the same thing for the positive. The more positive you are, and that's why like really you're showing your appreciation, really thanking people for things, or thinking just being so grateful for stuff in your life, then the more things you start to see. And it's like so interesting. Like we open up these antennas the way that we want to see them. And what we have to realize and what we have to understand for ourselves is that we have to be able to take certain actions. We have to do the things that we want to be doing. So let's begin about actions. What actions can we take? So number one is like we might have to get exposure. Like we might literally just like exposure therapy. You might have to go and do that thing. So personally, there's like certain areas in my life that I just get nervous about. I just get a little anxious about, stressed out about. And I know the more that I do that thing, then the more comfortable it's going to get. And I know every time I have to do something and my anxiety is saying, don't do it, Bennett. Like you need to save yourself. I know like, I got to breathe and just go. Because like that's going to be the time where I'm going to let it grow. That's going to be my moment of growth. And so many people don't realize that, but we have that ability. We can put ourselves in a situation to allow ourselves to start to see that success. And once we do that, then it's like a totally different ballgame. So recognizing that number one is if you see yourself being scared to do something you know you should be doing. And it's something that you can do. It's not something that like, okay, I need to really prepare myself. Like, I need to go swimming, but like I'm learning to stop wearing a bathing suit. Like, no, like, and you're wearing a bathing suit. So ask yourself, like, what's the small thing that I could do? How can I get there? I remember there's one time I had to go get a permit for a building. It was my first time, and I was like extremely nervous. And there was like 2 lines I need to wait on. I ended up waiting on 1 line, got the thing that I needed, and like I was gonna book. I was like, okay, I'm done. I can't stand it here. And as I was leaving, I'm like, you know what? Let me just stay in the room. And I just went there and I stood in the middle, and I was just like taking it all in. Wasn't putting pressure on myself to go back on another line. And I was just like looking around, seeing all the other people around me, hearing all like the terrible stories about what might happen, which never really happened. And what I realized is that the more I could just put myself in that area, the more I could put myself in that arena, then the more exposure I could get. The more exposure I get, the more comfortable I'll feel. And what ended up happening is I waited there for like 5-10 minutes, just sitting down, just looking. And then all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I can wait on that line over there. And I ended up going on that line. And I was like so proud of myself. Because what I realized is that if we could just get ourselves more comfortable, then we have that ability to start to step into certain things. I think another thing that we can start to do to take that action is don't think. I know it's not crazy, but like just don't talk yourself out of it. So many times we talk ourselves out of it. And because we talk ourselves out of it, we end up not doing it. And that's what we spoke a little bit about before, about how the more we think about it, then the more the bigger it's going to get. And the bigger it's going to get, the scarier it's going to get. But we have to realize it's like, no, it's not us. We have to take the action that we have to take. And if we could stop putting so much pressure on ourselves and stop thinking about it too much, then all of a sudden, then we have that ability to really start to step into it. So number one, do some exposure. Number two, don't think about it. Of course, work on it, like really practice, like think about it. You can do the deep work. Sometimes the therapy works. Sometimes mindset coaching works. Like you got to figure out what works for you. But I think at the end of the day, if we have actions that could prove to ourselves that we could do certain things, then all of a sudden, like we could start to prove to ourselves, hey, you know what? I was scared of this, but not anymore. And it's really just changing the script. Reminding yourself. I know Dr. Nate Zinsser talks about this when he talks about athletes. What he tries to train athletes to do is to build this highlight reel of themselves, but all the accomplishments that they have, not to make them cocky, but to make them confident that, hey, I'm stepping into this moment. And even if I've never been here before, I've never been in the Super Bowl, I've never been in the championship, what I do know is that I have a lot of support behind me, that I have succeeded in the past. And guess what? I could probably succeed again. And that's something that could be really important for us. And I think the last tip we can have is to just look to reframe the win. A lot of people put so much pressure on the win that we need to see that success. We need to see the money in the bank account. We need to close the deal. And we can start to put ourselves pressure, because right now we're not at the point where we're focusing solely on the deal. We're just focused on picking up the phone. And if we can start to say to ourselves, hey, you know what? how can I focus on the deal a little bit differently? How can I reframe this win? And I remember this one time working with a client of mine, and he was working in sales, and he told me that his company got shot for whatever reason. And what we started to do is like we just started to pick up the phone and just pick up the phone. Like that was literally the first step. Today we're just gonna hold the phone in our hands with like the numbers. If you're on your cell phone, like just the numbers facing you. We're not gonna even dial anything. Next day we're like we're gonna dial numbers. We're not gonna press send. We're just gonna dial numbers. The next day we're gonna press send, but guess what? We're not gonna care if they pick up or not. The wind is just pressing that green button and press send. And slowly but surely, we're constantly building this up because the wind isn't about making the deal. The wind is to just dial the numbers. I can do that. You could break it down into small steps. I'm telling you, it could be transformational. So what is it that you're scared to do? What is that one thing that you know that if you could start to take action on, you're going to be able to see that success? And I think if you could start to do that, then all of a sudden you start to break away from most people, because most people don't have the lives that they want because they don't do the things that they want. They don't do the things that they want because they're so scared to do it. And we all have these beliefs. We all have these fears in ourselves. We all have this people in our heads that are talking about us to us that are not actually talking about us. And even if they are talking about us, who cares? It's not their life. And if we could start to recognize that, number one is what's the mindset side of it? And number two, what are the practical steps? What are the actions I could take? Whether it's the exposure, whether it's just not thinking, reframing the win, whatever it is that you're going to be doing, it could be something that could be extremely beneficial. So let me know what questions you have. I'd love to be able to help out if I can. See everybody on the next one.